The galaxy was full of life, but not all life was safe. Some civilizations had built mighty fleets, cities that stretched across planets, and empires that lasted for thousands of years. Others were small, weak, and easily forgotten. Among them was a fragile alien race that lived on the edge of known space. Their world was green, with seas like glass and forests that sang with strange winds. But their skies were no longer peaceful. For weeks, their people had seen shadows above their planet. Ships that did not belong to them had appeared, dark and cruel, moving like hunters circling prey. These ships belonged to an enemy no one dared to name aloud. They were stronger, merciless, and endless in number. Every planet they touched, they stripped bare. Every people they met, they crushed. The small race knew they had no chance to fight. Their weapons were old, their fleets too thin, and their soldiers too few. So in their final hope, they sent out a signal. It was simple, desperate, and carried across the void of space. It said only one thing: help us. We cannot survive alone. The signal went out like a whisper into a storm. It crossed star systems, passed by trade routes, and entered the listening posts of great empires. The first empire to hear it ignored it. To them, the planet was weak and not worth saving. The second empire heard it and laughed. Why should they waste their fleets on strangers? The third empire heard it, but their leaders were too busy with their own wars to care. And so the message drifted on unanswered. On the planet below, the alien leaders waited. Every hour they looked up into the night sky, praying for lights that would mean salvation. Mothers held their children tight, whispering that someone would come. Soldiers sharpened old weapons, though they knew they would not last long in battle. The people grew weaker each day, not from hunger, but from fear. Fear of being forgotten, fear of being erased from the galaxy without a trace. But the signal did not die. It kept traveling further and further, through dark space where no empire ruled. It passed broken satellites, empty colonies, and dead stars, until at last it reached a world that no one expected. A world that was still young in the eyes of the galaxy. A world called Earth. Humanity had been listening. For years, Earth's great antennas and deep space receivers had waited for a voice, for proof that they were not alone. And now they heard not a greeting, not a welcome, but a cry. The message struck deep in human hearts. Scientists listened, governments argued, but the people themselves understood it instantly. This was not just a call for help. This was a chance to prove who humanity was meant to be. The alien plea was played in every human language. News channels repeated it until the words were burned into every mind. Help us, we cannot survive alone. Some feared it was a trap. Others warned that humans were not ready for war among the stars. But there were many who remembered Earth's own history. Times when smaller nations begged for help and no one came. Times when the strong turned away and the weak were destroyed, and so a choice was made. Humanity would answer. The fleets were prepared. Great carriers rose into orbit, bristling with weapons. Soldiers stood ready, not knowing what waited for them, but refusing to turn away. Even those who had never seen the stars before felt something awaken inside them. A duty, a fire. For the first time, humanity was not fighting for itself. It was fighting for strangers across the galaxy. Back on the alien planet, the leaders had almost lost hope. Their signal had been floating in silence for so long that many believed it was lost. But one night, as the enemy ships gathered for their first strike, the skies lit up, not with destruction but with light. Dozens of human warships broke through the dark, their engines burning bright like new suns. The aliens gasped in disbelief. They were small compared to the towering empires of the galaxy. They expected indifference, silence, and death. Yet here was an entire fleet from a world they had never heard of, a world no one had trusted to answer. The enemy ships paused, surprised to see new arrivals. The weak were never defended. That was the law of the stars. But humanity had not come to follow that law. Humanity had come to break it. And in that single moment, the fate of the galaxy began to change. The cry for help had reached ears that refused to stay silent. The forgotten were no longer alone. The small alien race did not yet understand what kind of allies had answered their call. They only knew that someone had come. But soon, all would learn that when humanity answered, the stars themselves would tremble. The alien leaders had gathered in silence. Their last defenses were weak, their fleets scattered, their hope nearly gone. When the skies tore open with new lights, many thought it was the enemy finally arriving in full force. But what they saw was something else. Dozens of ships appeared, unlike any design they had known. They were not built like the grand, polished cruisers of the old empires, nor did they carry the jagged menace of the enemy. These ships were raw, powerful, armored like predators of steel. They did not glide with grace. They stormed into the system like thunder. At first, the alien observers whispered among themselves, "Who are they? Why would anyone come here?" Then across their communications, a voice spoke. Calm, steady, and filled with an accent none of them understood at first. Yet the meaning was clear, for the message had been translated by machines. "This is the fleet of Earth. We have heard your call. We will stand with you." The words were simple, but to the small alien race they felt like fire in the cold. For the first time in weeks they felt something stronger than fear. They felt hope. The enemy ships, still circling like vultures, paused. Their scanners studied the newcomers. Humanity was not known to them. These were ships from a young world, barely a century past its first steps into space. To the enemy, this should have been nothing more than an amusing sight. Yet the humans did not wait for judgment. Within minutes of arrival, the human fleet spread into formation. Heavy carriers moved to shield the alien homeworld. Frigates darted outward, engines blazing. Fighters launched in swarms, wings shining against the void. The humans did not arrive to talk. They arrived to fight. From the surface of the planet, the aliens watched in awe. They had sent out a single cry, weak and fading, never expecting it to reach anyone. And now, an entire fleet hung above them, willing to die for strangers. Mothers pointed to the sky so their children would remember the sight. Elders wept openly, unable to believe salvation had come at the last possible moment. But not everyone in the galaxy celebrated. Far away, other civilizations observed. Their long-range sensors had also picked up the human fleet's arrival. The elder races scoffed. "Foolish," one leader said. "They are wasting ships and lives for a world that means nothing." Another laughed. "This young species will burn themselves out before the enemy even notices them." Yet a few voices, quieter and older, did not laugh. They remembered the first time humanity had entered the stars. They remembered the strange fire in human eyes, the kind that never dimmed. These few whispered to their councils, "Do not underestimate them. They are not like us." Back near the alien planet, the human flagship loomed in orbit. On its command deck, the human admiral stood in silence, his hands behind his back. He was not a man of many words. He did not need speeches. His crew already understood. They were here not because it was easy, not because it was safe, but because someone had asked, and that was enough. When the first wave of enemy ships broke formation and surged forward, the humans answered instantly. Orders flew across the fleet. Missiles armed, cannons turned, shields flared to life. The silence of space shattered with light and fury. The aliens on the ground stared upward as the battle began. They had seen war before, but never like this. Human ships moved with a strange rhythm. They did not fight like machines. They fought like hunters, striking with brutal precision, then vanishing into the void before the enemy could strike back. Every move seemed reckless until it worked. Enemy ships exploded one by one, torn apart by weapons they had never seen before. Human fighters darted between massive cruisers, weaving patterns of death, and when the enemy tried to overwhelm them with sheer numbers, the humans pushed harder, refusing to break. "Why do they fight so fiercely?" one alien elder asked. "Why would they risk everything for us?" The answer came not from the humans, but from one of their own soldiers who had survived the first attacks. He looked at the battle, eyes wide, and whispered, "Because they know what it feels like to be forgotten." The fight raged on, and even though the enemy still outnumbered them, the balance had shifted. The small alien world was no longer prey waiting to be devoured. It had defenders who came from a world no one had expected to rise. And as explosions lit the dark sky, a single truth began to spread like fire across the galaxy. Humanity had arrived. And when humanity arrived, nothing remained the same. The first wave came fast. Dark enemy ships surged forward, their hulls jagged like broken blades. They outnumbered the humans 3-1. To the small alien race watching from the ground, it looked hopeless. They had seen these ships before, tearing through defenses without mercy. This was how worlds died, but the humans did not flinch. On the bridge of the flagship, the admiral gave one order. "Hold the line." The human fleet spread wide, a shield before the planet. Carriers turned, their launch bays spilling out fighters like sparks from fire. Cruisers aimed their cannons. Smaller frigates darted ahead, weaving paths across the enemy's approach. Then the void lit up. The enemy opened fire first. Bolts of plasma, beams of raw energy, filled the black with deadly light. Entire sections of space burned bright. The small aliens cried out, certain the human ships would vanish under the storm. But to their shock, the human fleet endured. Shields flared, armor plates glowed red, but the ships did not break. And then the humans answered. Missiles streaked across the void, breaking apart into swarms of smaller warheads that twisted like hunting wolves. Cannons fired in sharp rhythm, slamming holes into enemy hulls. Human fighters, fast and reckless, cut through the fire, shooting down bombers before they reached the planet's surface. The galaxy had seen wars before. Empires fought with discipline and control, their tactics like measured chess. But humanity's way was different. They fought with a raw, chaotic force like soldiers who had carried 1,000 years of wars in their blood. Their moves were strange, sometimes reckless, sometimes brutal, but each strike hit harder than anyone expected. An alien commander on the ground whispered, almost to himself, "They fight as if they do not fear death." The enemy pressed harder. Larger warships entered the fray, black giants armed with cannons that could split a mountain. One struck a human destroyer, tearing it apart in seconds. Fire exploded across the void. For a heartbeat, silence held. Then the human fleet pushed back even harder. Instead of retreating, they advanced. The admiral's order was simple: closer. The enemy expected the humans to hold distance, to use their numbers slowly. Instead, human ships closed the gap, turning the battle into a storm of close-range fire. Frigates darted under the bellies of larger ships, blasting their weak points at point-blank range. Carriers launched fighters directly into enemy formations, creating chaos and confusion. In one daring move, a damaged human cruiser rammed an enemy warship. Its engines burned until the last second, smashing both ships into a flaming wreck. The aliens on the planet gasped in horror, then in awe. They had never seen anyone fight like this. Human losses grew, but so did their victories. Enemy ships began to break one after another. Some exploded into fire. Others drifted, crippled, as human fighters swarmed them like angry hornets. Yet the enemy was vast. For every ship destroyed, 2 more came forward. The human fleet was still outnumbered, still outgunned. And yet the rhythm of the fight began to shift. The enemy, once feared as unstoppable, hesitated. Their formations wavered. Their commanders had never faced a foe that refused to retreat, a foe that turned desperation into power. On the surface, the alien people gathered in their cities, watching the skies burn. Children pointed to the streaks of fire, asking which ones were the humans. Elders shook their heads, unable to answer. All they knew was this: for the first time in their memory, the enemy was not winning. The human admiral stood firm on the flagship's bridge. His crew worked without pause, voices calm even as alarms screamed. He did not smile, but his eyes were steady. He had seen this before, humanity standing against impossible odds. On Earth, they had fought wars where defeat was certain, yet still they endured. This battle was no different. Hours passed. Space became a graveyard of burning wrecks. Human ships limped, scarred, but still alive. Enemy fleets, once confident, pulled back little by little. For the first time in years, the dark hunters of the galaxy tasted fear. Finally, the order came across the enemy channels. Retreat. The small alien race, still gathered on their world, heard the silence that followed. They looked up and saw the sky no longer filled with endless shadows. They saw human ships still standing guard. And they wept, not from fear but from relief. Yet even as the battle ended, the humans knew this was only the beginning. The enemy would return stronger than before. Other empires were already watching, calculating, whispering about Earth's sudden rise. But one truth had already been written across the stars. Humanity had entered the war, and nothing would ever be the same again. The battlefield grew silent. Wrecks drifted across space, glowing like dying embers. Human ships floated among them, scarred and broken but still standing. For the small alien race, it was more than survival. It was a miracle. Their leaders sent messages to the human fleet, their voices trembling. "Why? Why did you come for us?" "We are nothing to you. We have no riches, no armies, no power to offer. Why would you risk your lives for strangers?" For a long moment there was no reply. The alien leaders thought perhaps the humans would demand tribute, or use them as pawns in some larger plan. That was how the empires worked. The strong never gave without expecting more. Finally the answer came. Not from a politician, but from a human commander whose voice carried across the channels. His words were calm, steady, and without pride. "Because once long ago we called for help, and no one came. The aliens fell silent. The commander continued. On our own world, we have known war, hunger, and despair. We have cried out for aid only to be ignored. We remember what it feels like to be abandoned, and so we will not abandon you. The message spread quickly across the alien cities. Ordinary people heard it, repeated it, and carried it like fire through their homes. For the first time, they understood. The humans were not here for gain. They were here because they chose to be. Yet elsewhere in the galaxy, the reaction was different. In the great halls of ancient empires, the news of the battle spread like thunder. Reports came in. Humans had faced an enemy fleet and forced it to retreat. A race that was supposed to be young, inexperienced, had done what older powers had failed to do. The elders of the empires did not celebrate. They whispered in fear. If this is how humans fight for strangers, what will they do for themselves? Some empires dismissed it, saying the enemy would return in greater numbers. Others began secret meetings debating whether humanity should be contained before it grew too strong. But all of them agreed on one thing. Earth could no longer be ignored. On the alien world that had been saved, things began to change. The people who had once prepared for death now looked at the skies with hope. Soldiers who had sharpened old weapons now trained beside human marines, learning tactics they had never imagined. Families invited human officers into their homes, sharing meals and stories. In every corner of their cities, one phrase echoed. They answered. But hope was not the only thing spreading. Fear grew as well. The alien leaders, though grateful, began to realize what humanity's presence meant. They had not just saved one planet, they had shaken the galaxy. The human commander met with the alien council in person. He was taller than they expected, with eyes that seemed to hold both kindness and storms. One counselor asked him directly, "Do you understand what you have done? The enemy will not forget. The empires will not forgive. You have marked yourselves." The commander only nodded. "We know. Humanity has always carried the weight of its choices. This is no different." The council fell silent. They had never met a people who carried such calm in the face of certain danger. For most of the galaxy, survival meant silence and obedience. For humans, survival seemed to mean defiance. The ordinary aliens began to whisper about the humans in awe. Children played in the streets, pretending to pilot human fighters. Artists painted scenes of the battle, showing human ships standing like walls against the darkness. To them, humanity was more than an ally. Humanity had become a symbol. But in the dark corners of the galaxy, the whispers were different. Some alien spies reported back to their masters. The humans are not saviors. They are a storm. And storms cannot be controlled. The galaxy was watching. Some saw hope. Some saw danger. But all understood the same truth. Humanity had revealed its heart. It was a heart that remembered pain. A heart that refused silence. A heart that burned with a fire that could not be put out. The truth was clear now, even to the smallest alien child. When humanity answered a call for help, they did not just save lives. They changed the stars themselves. The smoke of war still drifted in the void. Shattered ships spun slowly, their fires burning out in silence. On the alien homeworld below, the skies were clear for the first time in weeks. Children no longer looked upward in fear, but in wonder. Humanity had stood for them, and the enemy was gone, at least for now. But beyond the celebration, beyond the relief, a new tension spread across the galaxy. The battle was not just another skirmish. It was a signal. Humanity had stepped into the open, and the stars had noticed. Across the empires, reports came in. Some dismissed the humans as reckless, doomed to collapse after their first taste of war. Others studied every detail with unease, whispering that no young species should fight like this, that no people should sacrifice themselves so freely for strangers. The ancient rulers, who had spent centuries weighing profit over compassion, now faced something they had not seen in a long time, an enemy that fought not for gain, but for principle. On the saved world, the alien council met with the human commander once more. Their gratitude was endless, yet their voices carried fear. "You have changed everything," one elder said. "By saving us, you have declared war on powers far greater than us both. The enemy will return, and now, the empires will see you as a threat." The commander did not deny it. He looked at the council with calm eyes worn by battle, yet steady as stone. "We did not come here to make the galaxy comfortable," he said. "We came because you asked, and we will come again when others call." The room fell silent. The aliens did not know whether to tremble or rejoice. For to them, humanity's promise was both a shield and a storm. Word spread quickly. Refugees on distant worlds whispered of the humans, telling stories of ships that fought like lions and soldiers who never broke. Merchants carried tales across star lanes, weaving them into rumors until they sounded like legends. Even those who had never seen Earth now spoke the name with respect and fear. But not all saw humanity as saviors. In the great palaces of rival empires, strategies shifted. The humans will disrupt the balance, one ruler said. They cannot be allowed to rise unchecked. Fleets were quietly moved. Spies were dispatched. Humanity had won a battle, but in doing so it had drawn the gaze of giants. On the alien planet, however, the mood was different. Where there had been despair, there was now determination. The people rebuilt, but this time with allies at their side. Human engineers walked their streets, helping to restore power and defenses. Human marines trained alien soldiers, teaching them not only how to fight but how to endure. The bond between them grew quickly, born not of politics but of blood spilled together. And yet humanity asked for nothing in return. No territory, no tribute, no promise of rule. This puzzled the aliens most of all. One young alien child asked a human soldier, "Why do you give so much and take nothing?" The soldier smiled faintly and answered, "Because someone has to." It was a simple answer, but one that carried across the stars. As weeks passed, the galaxy began to shift in subtle ways. Smaller civilizations, long ignored by the empires, began to look to Earth with new hope. Messages were sent in secret, not just calls for help, but offers of friendship. For the first time in memory, the powerless felt that they were not alone. The enemy, meanwhile, seethed. They had faced defeat not by an empire, but by a species they had barely known. Their pride burned hotter than their losses. In the darkness of their strongholds, they swore vengeance. Next time, they would not underestimate humanity. Next time, they would bring their full fury. But humanity was ready. They had tasted the weight of the galaxy's judgment and did not shrink from it. They knew what was coming and they did not fear it. The final scene played out in the stars above the saved world. Human ships remained in orbit, engines glowing softly like watchful guardians. The alien people stood below, gazing upward not with despair but with pride. They had been saved, yes, but more than that, they had been changed. For the galaxy had learned a new truth, one that could not be forgotten. When humanity heard a cry, they answered. And when they answered, the stars themselves shifted. The story would be told again and again, whispered in the dark corners of space, sung in markets, and carried across fleets. The words were always the same. They begged for help, and humanity came. And nothing was ever the same again.